it up.
Hello and welcome to In the Community. I'm Joe Dexter, Local People, Local Stories. Today we have a great episode for you as Steven Pulliam will join us, the Dan Riverkeeper, to discuss a new study coming up with microplastics and our streams, rivers, and lakes here in North Carolina. The impact that microplastics might be having in our community. It might seem small, you might not even have heard about it, but there is a true impact around the world of how microplastics are affecting us right here, not just in our region, but like I mentioned, across the world. Steven will join us coming up in just a bit, but I wanted to provide a little bit more information about microplastics and the study. The key to solving problems is gathering information. And that's what the Dan Riverkeeper, the good Stewards of Rockingham County, and so many others are doing in this collaborative study on microplastics in water across North Carolina. The study, Improving Human and Ecosystem Health Through Microplastic Reduction, launched in February as a collaborative project across 10 nonprofit environmental organizations in order to get baselines and collect surface samples. Because microplastics are impacting us even though we don't necessarily see it every single day. Microplastics are small and not picked up by typical water filtration systems and are often eaten by fish, birds, and other aquatic animals, negatively impacting their health. The sad reality is plastic is everywhere, folks. It's part of our lives, and now it's definitely an issue across North Carolina and in other areas. We see basic pollution on a daily basis, said Steven Pulliam in a statement this week, but very little is known about the amount of microplastic pollutions in North Carolina's waterways. This study will help us develop understanding of the volume of plastics in our streams. What we don't know is important to find out, and that's what this study will do. We'll talk about it more with Steven Pulliam, the Dan Riverkeeper, coming up right here on In the Community. So many different areas to touch on here this afternoon, but a very important discussion to have. We'll have it right now with Steven Pulliam right here on In the Community. We now welcome in my friend, the Dan Riverkeeper, Steven Pulliam, joins us of Good Stewards of Rockingham County. Steven, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing well. Thank you for having me, Joe. How's it going your way?
Good. Glad to have you on and to discuss this study that is now underway. Microplastics, let's start there. What is a microplastic?
Microplastics can be a lot of things. Of course, all going back to a plastic source. They're very small, typically under 5 millimeters or so. There isn't a real standard to measure what their definitions are. This is all pretty new. It's not new as far as being in our water systems, but it is a new project to get more information because so little has been done. There's not a good amount of studies that have been performed, and some of those studies don't have a good standard operating procedure. So they're kind of taken with a bit of salt, as you'd say. So we're trying to work together for the state of North Carolina to, as a collaborative with, as a unity of a group, the Waterkeeper Carolina group, to do things, monitoring the same way. We're packaging, transporting, they're being tested in the same procedures. So it's a really good standardized study that should give us some very accurate results. And again, going back to a lack of information and studies so far, we don't really know. There is, to some certainty that there are microplastics in water surface waters across our county and our region. We don't know true amounts outside of guesses or stipulation. So this is something that could get us up-to-date information, some good baseline data to go forward. Hopefully in the future, regardless of the amount of plastic that may or may not be in our particular stream here, it could lead us to kind of push for more renewable sources of disposable fast food containers and beverage containers. So, we see plastic so much, it's kind of hard to get it all contained, to keep it away from from water sources, from ground. So hopefully we learn from what we find from this study and can use it in a positive manner going forward once we have those results, and make a positive change to keep the waters clearer and hopefully reduce plastic use consumption.
Sometimes when we don't vet solutions and continuously vet them down the line, we don't realize that they can become a problem. That's how I discuss and talk about plastic because, like you mentioned, we're using it for everything from Tupperware to the fishing lure that I might use to try and catch a fish. Plastic is involved in those processes, and even if there's BPA or not BPA or whatever have you, it is an issue that needs to be at least looked at, and that's why I'm glad that you're doing this study with so many others.
Yeah, 15 riverkeepers in the state of North Carolina, who we work together closely on other campaigns like E. coli monitoring. So it's good not only to have riverkeepers in a state, but to have so many great organizations that are supporting these riverkeepers in one state. We can get a lot done. It's hard for one person or 10 people to kind of spread out across one region, but when we have these different organizations that are sponsoring all these riverkeepers, or these riverkeepers are part of those organizations, like I am with Good Stewards, it makes it a lot easier. So each person knows their landscape better, they know their potential problem areas better, and then again, following that same operating procedure and collection and transportation procedure to the lab. We kind of rule out a lot of the obstacles and variables that could negatively impact and kind of take away our trust and public trust and whatever the results may be when we get them at the end of the study.
This is a great question from our friend Jenny Edwards. What about these clothes made from recycled plastic bottles? Does washing them in our home washers contribute to microplastics?
I have a personal hypothesis about what our results may be. We know there's a big issue in the northern part of our state with litter on the roadsides, in our streams. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a great need for people to be hosting these roadside cleanups and on the water cleanups. I have, with a little bit of educated guess and a hypothesis, I believe that if we find plastics in our water, source tracking would identify them to fiber plastics. So plastics, like Jenny said, that could be part of clothing, other synthetic fibers. When you wash them, if you don't have a septic system at your home, you're probably living in a city, and they're going to go into a city treatment facility, which typically would discharge into a surface water. So without any data to support just the general hypothesis, I think that we would likely find a lot of the plastic, if any, is going to be coming from sources like that, clothing. And there have been studies done before specifically for source tracking the types of plastic. From most that I had read, they all relate back to washing your clothes in your washing machine at home, the plastics going out with that wastewater into the discharge and the treatment system plants, and then back into our surface waters.
You can follow the study as it gets ongoing and learn more about the Dan Riverkeeper and the Riverkeeper's work, danriverkeeper.org, where he'll be documenting where this study will take place. Tell us a little bit, Stephen, about where you'll be testing, some of the areas that you will be testing as well.
For our particular spot here in Rockingham County, we're doing 2 sections on Matrimony Creek. One section is far north in the rural area on Garrett Road. That's our upstream site. The downstream site is at the Matrimony Creek Trailhead in Eden. So every other month, we're going out to the site. We're taking from each site, the upstream and the downstream location, we're taking 2 liters of water and 2 liters of sediment from the bottom of the creek bed and sending those to a lab in Wilmington that analyzes them for plastic contaminations. The selection specifically for our area here at Matrimony Creek, it's a really vast rural watershed that goes into Matrimony, especially at the northern half where the watershed comes in from Virginia and parts as far as Stoneville in North Carolina. There's not a big population, so it's a good control. We know that should be, or we would expect that rural area to be a lower number, and as it would flow by a city down to Matrimony Trailhead, we would expect that number likely, if there is a presence of microplastics, we would expect that to go up. So it's kind of a self-control built into the study, and just the entire area, even if it's near Eden or not, it's still not a very vastly populated area. It's a small county, small amount of people. So it really gives us a glimpse into, if this is impacting a rural stream, then imagine what is going on in larger streams around cities. And not so much this is an inadvertent display of people dumping plastics or littering. There's many sources and ways that it could get into the water. We're just wanting to know how. Hindsight's 2020. We're now realizing that plastics are an issue when it comes to recycling and disposing of them, in any way or form, as Jenny was saying, in clothing or in plastic bottles that you got from a store that had soda or water in them themselves. So we're really looking at a rural area to see, how much has this impacted not just cities across North Carolina, but even these small places like this as well.
How much have issues in the past do you think might play a role in this microplastic study, such as the coal ash spill in Eden and other issues? And then another point that I'd like to make too, Stephen, is could you share with folks just how much we see plastics in the rivers and streams and lakes that are in our area? You ride the lakes, you paddle them. I've gone with you, and I call myself a paddler, but you know how that goes. But anyways, I've seen just the literal amounts of garbage and plastic that have been taken out of streams by folks like you and many others that are stewards of the water.
For the first question, I don't foresee any kind of variables as far as other sources of non-point pollution impacting the study. That's another reason for selection in Matrimony Creek. It's a nice creek. It's a really clean creek for the most part. It is a creek, so I mean it's not something to drink directly out of, but it's clean. So we could go to somewhere that we identified as an impacted stream that had impaired health. Then we would expect to see issues with plastics or other contaminants possibly. So again, it kind of goes back to having a good baseline to, we will go to one of our better waters and start there and, see what happens. Duke, I don't think anything with the coal ash would play into this. It's upstream from where the site was in Eden that had the coal ash spill years ago. The only issue we really see as far as testing results in this area that we're going through, and it stands for any area in the Dan River, is intermittent elevation of E. coli levels. But again, that wouldn't go into anything that would affect results for plastic. As far as the amount of plastics in the river, like you said, you've been there firsthand and seen. And, when I've been out with a lot of different folks and a lot of different groups for cleanups, and, people always ask, like, why would people just dump this in the river? Like 99% of them don't. It's people that go down the road and throw their litter out their window, dump tires or trash somewhere on a deserted farm, like we've had lots of calls about. When you get stormwater events, it doesn't really matter where you throw out paper or plastic trash. If there's enough stormwater surge, then it's going to push all that into a surface water of some kind. It might not be overnight, but a good majority of the waste that's disposed of improperly on the side of the highways goes into a surface water and the Dan River. So it's not so much that people are being so evil towards our streams. They just are lacking that bit of knowledge that in terms of litter, we all live downstream. No matter where you put it, it's going to affect someone. So we're really trying to get some things going in the county with hopefully with COVID having numbers coming down in the near future, we can get some advisory boards back and meeting and come up with some good strategies to address litter in general, but especially within a few miles of watersheds, a few miles within bridges or overpasses or things like that gives them a direct and quick route into our watershed.
He's Steven Pulliam joining us, the Dan Riverkeeper of Good Stewards of Rockingham County, to discuss this 2-year study underway, Improving Human and Ecosystem Health Through Microplastic Reduction, launched in February as a collaborative project across 10 nonprofit environmental organizations. Taking water surface samples, Stephen, as well as sediment. I can understand the water samples, but could you explain why sediment is important to study?
When, particularly in our area, erosion is a concern. Turbidity levels are typically high after a rain event. So whatever is in those big rain events, especially when mud or sand or silt or any kind of aggregate that's pushed into the river through stormwater surge, a lot of that goes directly to the bottom after some of the flood waters receding. You just have so much that's put into the bottom of the river through erosion and stormwater alone. So, when testing the water, you're getting just a quick glimpse into the history and to the possible future of that water. So you're there at one point in time and collect that sample. As far as the sediment, it's more of a solid matter. It's not going to be flowing and changing as quickly as the surface water content itself is. So it's important to know, what's there, what would be considered historical contamination. So what's buried in the creek or the riverbed has probably been there for a greater length of time than what you're going to pull out of the water. So it kind of gives you a two pronged approach of seeing, what's our immediate impact as far as plastic contamination, and then what's the historical impact as far as what's buried underneath.
I think an important thing to say too is analytical data is so important, and to be able to predict the future and look at the future and make solutions to solve problems in the future. That's why this is key, and working together with all these organizations across the state will create a bigger roadmap. That's what is needed, is the roadmap to see where this is going, where it could go, and possible solutions to fix those issues.
Yeah, we've had multiple approaches at data collection and analysis, and really the best method to go about is, one, we need to be sort of data engineers and figure out what questions we need to ask and which ones deserve to be asked, and then from there you go into actual analytical data recovery, to where we can do boots on the ground testing. We have many sites. We have 8 sites we visit regularly. And we do more extensive testing as needed in reports and things, but that's really our baseline. We can't say we can't determine the quality of the river off of a month or a year's worth of results. We need as much data as possible to follow trends, to discover nuances, maybe find different variables that we're not calculating into our full equation of the quality of the river. So, the more data we have, the better. The more informed decision we can make, the more solid our chances are of actually coming up with a plan to mitigate what problems we have and have a cleaner river tomorrow. Again, it's good to have some kind of short-term goal or short-term project that you can have results and kind of have your deliverable, something to show right away. But when it comes into terms of protecting and restoring our environment, it's something we take serious. So, we're in for the long haul. Realistically, it's going to be hard to notice a difference of anything in a short amount of time, 5-10 years, but we're setting up for the long haul. So if I don't see results in the 10-20 years ahead, or even in my lifetime, I know that we're working to make sure that there are things in place to make sure the next generation has a much better starting point than we did. Slow and steady wins the race, and you can't make impactful change overnight. So it's really just grassroots effort, getting great plans in place, recovering data from streams, creeks, rivers, from the general public, involving everyone, and hoping we could be realistic about the results that we're going to receive and what time frame they're going to be delivered in.
He's Steven Pulliam, the Dan Riverkeeper of Good Stewards of Rockingham County. The study is Improving Human and Ecosystem Health Through Microplastic Reduction, launching last month as a collaborative project across 10 nonprofit environmental organizations. First of all, Steven, I want to thank you for joining us on In the Community, Local People, Local Stories. And before we head out of here, tell us how people can find out more information on the work that Good Stewards is doing, as well as yourself.
For Good Stewards and all the work with Dan Riverkeeper on the rivers and streams, you can go to danriverkeeper.org. You can also keep following what, as a collective, the Riverkeepers of North Carolina are doing at waterkeeperscarolina.org. The Waterkeepers Carolina is an organization of riverkeepers like our organization here, 15 across the state. Again, we do lots of programs together, like E. coli monitoring for pure farms, pure waters, and now this study as well is another major one. But yeah, it's not just one person watching after the river. There's a big group, a big group of riverkeepers out here doing a lot of good things. And Waterkeepers Carolina is definitely something to keep an eye on and check out.
Thanks, Steven, for joining us here on In the Community. Have a great day.
Thank you, Joe. You too.
He's Steven Pulliam, Dan Riverkeeper, Good Stewards of Rockingham County. The study, again, one more time, improving human and ecosystem health through microplastic reduction, launched in February, a collaborative effort between 10 environmental nonprofit organizations looking to get answers. And one thing that I like to say about water is we sometimes forget, not only is it the flowing river that we ride down on our kayak or our boat, or the lake that we fish on, it's the water that we drink. It's the tourism that brings people to our great community. Studying these things is imperative, and I expect that this study will tell us things that we need to know. And I also encourage people to head on over to danriverkeeper.org to keep in contact with this study, and you can follow the Dan Riverkeeper and Good Stewards on Facebook as well to follow this great study and the work. Again, you can head to danriverkeeper.org or waterkeeperscarolina.org. This coalition is going to continue as well to advocate on local and statewide issues to protect and promote water quality, because at the end of the day, the quality of our water is imperative. It's what we need in order to succeed, whether we're individuals, business, whether we are industry or the tourism side of things where we want to welcome people. So I want to thank Steven for stopping by and talking about this 2-year study of microplastics in our local waters and waters across North Carolina. I also want to thank you for listening to and watching In the Community, local people, local stories. If you have a suggestion for a topic or also somebody to talk to on In the Community, please feel free to reach out to me on Facebook at facebook.com/Dexter Media Solutions, or you can email me dextermediasolutions@gmail.com. I hope you all have a great Wednesday. Stay safe out there. Keep doing things that are great in our community. Keep telling stories as well. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, all right. Add it up.